11:45 p.m., the emergency room of a hospital near the massive Navy base in Virginia. The air is thick with the scent of antiseptic and exhaustion. A man sits motionless on a thin hospital bed. His file is deceptively simple. One fractured rib, a mild concussion. He says almost nothing to the senior doctors. He only offers one-word answers, his face a mask of iron. Anna Lopez, a 25-year-old rookie nurse, is assigned to watch him. She notices something strange. He hasn't touched his meal. His eyes never leave the door. In his military file, his title is just 2 words, SEAL Sniper. Anna Lopez had been a registered nurse for exactly 4 months. At the busy regional trauma center in Norfolk, Virginia, 4 months meant she was still a rookie. To the senior attending physicians and the veteran charge nurses, Anna was a set of hands to change IV bags and fetch blankets. She was the one who worked the graveyard shifts that no one else wanted. The shifts where the shadows felt longer and the weight of the patient's pain felt heavier. The ER at midnight was a chaotic symphony of sirens, groans, and the rhythmic beeping of monitors. It was a world governed by speed and efficiency, a place where the human element often got filed away under paperwork. In that noise, Anna's quiet, observant voice was often drowned out by the roar of seniority. Tonight, the ER was particularly tense. A training exercise at the nearby naval base had gone wrong, and several sailors had been brought in for evaluation. The air smelled of salt and jet fuel clinging to uniforms. Among the injured was Chief Petty Officer Mark Davis. He was a large man, built like a mountain, with hands that looked like they could crush the stone. Yet sitting on the edge of the ER gurney, he looked strangely small. He was wrapped in a standard-issue hospital gown that didn't fit his broad shoulders, staring at a fixed point on the opposite wall with an intensity that made Anna's skin prickle. It wasn't the look of a man in pain. It was the look of a man in a cage. The senior resident, Dr. Sterling, had finished his 5-minute assessment. Sterling was a man who lived by the clock, believing that if a patient wasn't actively bleeding out, they were stable. "Clear for discharge in the morning," Sterling had muttered to Anna while scribbling on a clipboard without once meeting the patient's eyes. "Just a rib and a bump on the head. He's stable. Get him some water and keep an eye on his vitals every hour. Don't overthink it, Lopez. We have a 3-car pileup coming in 10 minutes and I don't have time for feelings." Anna nodded, but as she stepped into Mark's curtained area, her instincts began to scream. She was a rookie, yes, but she was a rookie who listened to the things people didn't say. She noticed that while Mark's physical wounds were minor, his internal state was anything but stable. He sat perfectly upright, his back never touching the mattress. He looked like a statue carved from granite, but his eyes were moving with a restless, frantic energy. His hands were clenched into white-knuckled fists at his sides, gripping the thin hospital sheets as if he were holding onto a ledge. "Chief Davis," Anna said softly, holding a plastic cup of water. "I'm Anna. I'll be your nurse for the night. You've had a rough night. Can I get you anything for the pain?" Mark didn't turn his head. He didn't even blink. His gaze remained locked on the swinging doors of the ER. "I'm fine, nurse, just doing my time. I don't need pain meds. I don't need anything." His voice was a low, gravelly rasp, devoid of any emotion, yet vibrating with a hidden frequency of terror. Anna's eyes darted to the heart rate monitor behind his head. The green line wasn't steady. It was spiking. Every time the heavy double doors of the ER swung open, even 30 feet away, Mark's heart rate would jump from 60 to 90 beats per minute in a single second. He wasn't just tired or recovering. He was hunting for a threat in a room full of healers. He was clearing corners in his mind while his body was stuck in bed 3. Anna walked to the other side of the bed, deliberately placing herself within his peripheral vision. She noticed a fine tremor in his right hand, the hand of a man whose job required absolute sub-millimeter stillness. She saw the way he tracked every person walking past the curtain, not with curiosity, but with a calculated predatory focus. He was assessing every doctor, every janitor, and every visitor as a potential target or a potential threat. The doctor said your concussion is mild, Anna said, her voice a calm anchor in the storm of the ER. But you seem to be experiencing a lot of tension. Are you sure you're okay? Your monitor is telling a different story than your mouth. I don't need drugs and I don't need a therapy session, Mark snapped, finally looking at her. His eyes were bloodshot. The 1,000-yard stare she had read about in textbooks, but had never seen in real life. It was a look that bypassed the present and stared into a nightmare. I just need to get out of this box. This room is too small. The lights are too bright. Just let me go back to my unit. To Dr. Sterling and the veterans, Mark was just another tough guy soldier who didn't want to show weakness. They dismissed his silence as military stoicism, a byproduct of his training. But Anna saw the truth. She saw a man whose brain was still in a combat zone, a man whose body was present in a hospital bed in Virginia, but whose mind was still trapped in the moment the accident happened. He wasn't being difficult. He was being hypervigilant. He was terrified of the silence because in his world, silence was the precursor to an explosion. If you think rookies often notice things others ignore, type, that's unfair. The night wore on, and the ER grew even louder. The car accident victims arrived, and the hallway was filled with the frantic energy of a trauma team in high gear. Shouts of "clear" and the sound of gurneys clattering against walls echoed through the unit. Through all of it, Mark Davis remained in his statue-like state. Anna checked on him every 15 minutes, even though the protocol only required hourly checks. She found herself drawn to him, sensing the invisible pressure building inside that small curtained area. Each time she entered, she found him in the exact same position. He hadn't touched the tray of food. He hadn't touched the water. He was simply waiting for the next strike. Anna stood at the nursing station, looking at Mark's monitor from a distance. The heart rate spikes were becoming more frequent and more severe. She looked at his military history on the computer screen, digging deeper than the primary diagnosis. SEAL sniper, multiple deployments to high-threat environments, specialist in long-range reconnaissance and target interdiction. She realized that for a man like Mark, being in an ER, a place where he had no control, no weapon, and no clear line of sight to his sector, was a unique kind of psychological torture. He was a predator who had been stripped of his teeth and placed in a glass cage. She decided she couldn't stay silent. She approached Dr. Sterling near the trauma bay. "Doctor, sorry to interrupt. It's about Chief Davis in bed 3. I think we're missing a major clinical indicator." Sterling didn't even look up from his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "The sniper? We already cleared him, Lopez. Ribs and a concussion. He's a soldier. They're all a little wound up. He's fine." "Physically, he is stable, yes," Anna persisted, her heart racing as she challenged the hierarchy. "But he's showing all the hallmark signs of an acute stress reaction. He's hyper-responsive to auditory stimuli. He hasn't slept or eaten. His heart rate is highly unstable whenever there's a loud noise, which in this ER is every 30 seconds. I think he needs a psych consult or at least a transfer to a quieter observation unit before he reaches a breaking point." Sterling sighed, finally looking at her with a patronizing, weary smirk. "Lopez, the guy is a Navy SEAL. They're trained to be intense. They're trained to handle stress that would kill a civilian. He's probably just annoyed that he has to stay in a hospital for a scratch. Don't go looking for problems that aren't there. You've been here 4 months. Stick to the vitals and let him rest. That's an order." "He isn't resting," Anna whispered to herself as she walked back to Mark's bed. Her hands were shaking now, a mix of anger and fear. She felt the crushing weight of the hierarchy. She was the new girl. She was supposed to be seen and not heard. But when she looked at Mark, she saw a man who was drowning in plain sight, his lungs filled with the ghost of a trauma no one else wanted to see. She remembered a lecture from nursing school about the code whisperer, the professional who can read the unspoken signals of a patient's soul. She realized that Mark Davis was speaking to her, not with his mouth, but with the tension in his jaw, the sweat on his forehead, and the way his pupils dilated every time a metal tray hit the floor. She sat down on a stool next to his bed. She didn't bring a clipboard. She didn't bring a syringe. She just brought her presence. "Chief Davis." Mark, she said, her voice barely a whisper to avoid the ears of the passing staff. I know you're not fine. I can see it on the monitor. I can see it in the way your hands are shaking when you think I'm not looking. Mark stiffened, his muscles coiling like a spring. He looked at her, his eyes narrowing into cold slits. You don't know anything about me, nurse. You've seen my file. You haven't seen my life. I know that you're a sniper, Anna replied, meeting his predatory gaze with a soft, unwavering strength. And I know that snipers are trained to observe everything. I think you're observing this ER like it's an ambush. I think something happened during that training exercise. Something that didn't make it into the medical report Dr. Sterling read. The silence between them stretched for a long, heavy minute. The only sound was the muffled shouting of a doctor in the hallway and the mechanical, uncaring hum of the ventilator nearby. Mark's hand began to shake again, and this time he didn't try to hide it. He looked down at his trembling fingers, the fingers that were supposed to be the steadiest in the world, and a look of profound, soul-crushing shame crossed his face. It was a malfunction, Mark said, his voice so low Anna had to lean in. It was a confession pulled from the depths of a dark well. A teammate, my spotter. The barrier collapsed during a live fire drill. I watched him go down. I couldn't reach him because of the fire. I'm sitting here with a scratched rib while he's in the ICU 3 floors up, fighting for his life. And every time that door opens, I think it's the commander coming to tell me he's gone. I think it's my fault. The truth hit the air like a physical weight, suffocating and hot. Mark wasn't experiencing a simple concussion. He was experiencing the crushing guilt of a survivor and the acute trauma of witnessing a catastrophic failure in what was supposed to be a safe environment. His hypervigilance wasn't a military trait. It was a psychological scream for help. He was trapped in the active phase of a trauma, and the ER's noise was keeping the fire burning in his mind. If you realize she might be seeing something important, type, I was wrong. Anna didn't wait for permission this time. She knew that the hierarchy was a wall, but for Mark, that wall was a death sentence for his sanity. She knew that if he stayed in this high-stimulus environment, his mental state would continue to deteriorate into a full-blown dissociative crisis. She went over Dr. Sterling's head. She called the hospital's military liaison, a direct line she wasn't supposed to use without a supervisor's approval, and requested an immediate evaluation from the Navy's Psychiatric Rapid Response Team. Within 20 minutes, a man in an olive-drab flight suit entered the ER. He was Commander Robert Evans, a senior military psychologist who had spent 20 years in the darkest corners of the world. He didn't look at the charge nurse. He walked straight to Anna. Nurse Lopez, I'm Evans. You called about a Chief Davis? Your report over the phone was unusually detailed. Anna quickly summarized her observations. The heart rate variability, the hypervigilance, and most importantly, what Mark had confessed about the accident. She spoke with a clarity and authority that she didn't know she possessed. She wasn't a rookie nurse anymore. She was a bridge between the civilian world and the warrior's silence. She was an advocate for a man who had been trained to never ask for help. Commander Evans listened intently, his eyes darting to Mark in bed 3. Good catch, nurse. Usually these guys get lost in the system. People see the SEAL trident on their chest and assume they're indestructible. They think tough means immune. But no one is indestructible when they watch their brother fall in the dirt. Evans spent 45 minutes behind the curtain with Mark. The ER staff watched with confused and judgmental expressions. Dr. Sterling walked by twice, looking annoyed that his discharge orders had been halted by a rookie's whim. But when Evans finally emerged from the curtain, his expression was grim and his jaw was set. He walked to the nursing station, where the ER director and a now quiet Dr. Sterling were standing. I'm putting an immediate hold on Chief Petty Officer Davis's discharge, Evans announced, his voice carrying the weight of command authority. He's being transferred to the military psychiatric ward at the base hospital by secure transport immediately. He's experiencing a severe acute stress reaction with secondary trauma and survivor's guilt. If Nurse Lopez hadn't called me, this man would have walked out of here and potentially hurt himself or others in a state of dissociative panic. He was on the edge of a cliff, and no one was looking at him. Dr. Sterling looked stunned. his face turning a shade of pale that matched the hospital walls. I, I thought it was just the concussion. He said he was fine. I followed the physical protocol. Of course he said he was fine. Evans barked, his voice echoing in the quiet of the night. He's a SEAL sniper. He's trained to be the silent professional. He's trained to hide his pain so he can finish the mission. But medicine isn't about what the patient says. It's about what the patient shows. This nurse looked past the uniform. She looked at the man. She noticed the shadow while you were looking at the chart. Why didn't you? The silence that followed was the most powerful moment of Anna's young career. For the first time, the giants of the ER were looking at her not as a rookie, but as a professional who had saved a life they had almost discarded. The hierarchy had been leveled by the power of simple, diligent observation. Before Mark was moved to the transport gurney, he asked the orderlies to stop. He asked to see Anna one last time. He was still pale, but the tremor in his hand had subsided slightly, replaced by a weary calm. He looked at her, and for the first time, there was no thousand-yard stare. There was only a profound, raw sense of gratitude. "You noticed," Mark said simply. "I noticed," Anna replied, placing a hand on his arm, feeling the tension finally beginning to drain out of him. "I've spent my whole career being invisible," Mark whispered. "That's the job, to be a shadow in the grass, to be the one who sees but is never seen. I didn't think anyone would notice when the shadow started breaking apart." "In this hospital," Anna said firmly, her voice echoing the promise of her profession, "we don't leave anyone in the shadows. We are the watchers too. Go get some rest, Mark. I checked the system. Your spotter is out of surgery. He's stable." Mark nodded, a single tear tracking through the dust and grime on his cheek. He was wheeled out of the ER, not as a broken machine, but as a human being on the long path to healing. "Doctor." Sterling approached Anna later that night as the sun began to peek over the Virginia coastline, turning the Atlantic into a sheet of hammered gold. He looked tired, older, and thoroughly humbled. "I owe you an apology, Anna, a real one. I was arrogant. I let the rookie label cloud my clinical judgment. You were right. You saw the patient. I only saw the numbers on a screen." Anna didn't gloat. She didn't throw it back in his face. She simply adjusted her stethoscope and picked up her next clipboard. "We're on the same team, doctor. We just have to remember that sometimes the most important vital sign is the one that doesn't have a monitor." The news of the rookie nurse who saved the sniper spread through the hospital like wildfire. It wasn't about a miracle cure or heroic surgery. It was about the justice of being seen, the justice of a quiet professional receiving the credit they deserve. Anna Lopez had earned her place at the table, not through years of service, but through the courage to speak the truth. If you believe quiet professionals deserve credit, type, "I owe a debt." The following weeks were a whirlwind for Anna. She was no longer just the new girl who fetched coffee and changed linens. She was invited to join the hospital's patient safety committee, and senior nurses began asking for her opinion on difficult cases. The culture of the night shift began to shift fundamentally. Communication became more horizontal, less dictated by the number of years on a badge, and more by the quality of the observation. The rookie had become a mentor in the art of listening. 3 weeks after that night, Anna was finishing a grueling double shift. Her eyes were heavy and her feet were aching. As she walked toward the ER entrance, she saw a familiar figure standing near the glass doors. It was Mark Davis. He wasn't in a hospital gown this time. He was in his dress blues, polished, powerful, and standing with a newfound peace in his eyes. He looked like the hero the world thought he was, but he also looked like a man who was at peace with himself. He walked up to her, holding a small wooden box. "Nurse Lopez, I hoped I'd catch you before you went home." "Mark, you look wonderful," Anna said, genuinely surprised. "How are you feeling? How is your recovery going?" "Better," he said. "I spent some time in the quiet room at the base. I'm doing the work. My spotter, he's awake. He's going to walk again. He wanted me to thank the nurse who kept his shooter in one piece." "That's the best news I've heard all year," Anna smiled, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. Mark handed her the wooden box. I wanted to give you this. It's a tradition in our community. We call them challenge coins. This one is from my specific unit. It's usually only given to people who have served with us in the field, people who have proven their worth under fire. Anna opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside was a heavy silver coin with the image of a hawk and a sniper rifle, surrounded by the words, "The Silent Watchers." On the back it was engraved, "For clarity in the chaos." I didn't serve in the field, Anna said, feeling a lump in her throat. I just did my job in an ER. Yes, you did serve, Mark countered, his voice firm and filled with respect. You served in the most dangerous field of all, the one inside my head when I was lost. Snipers are trained to notice the smallest movement in a landscape of thousands of miles. We notice the flicker of a leaf, the change in the wind. We pride ourselves on being the best observers in the world. He paused, a small, genuine smile breaking through his rugged features. Looks like nurses are trained for that too. You saw a flicker in me that I thought I had hidden from everyone. You're a different kind of sniper, Anna. You hunt for the truth behind the mask. You saw the shot I couldn't take. The room around them went quiet for a moment as the other nurses and doctors watched the exchange. It was a moment of pure, raw respect. Anna realized then that her rookie status had been her greatest asset. She hadn't been jaded by years of seeing the same things. She had eyes that were still fresh, eyes that were still looking for the humanity behind the trauma. She was still a code whisperer. Mark snapped a crisp, perfect salute to the young nurse, a gesture of the highest honor from a SEAL to a civilian. Anna didn't know how to salute back, so she just placed her hand over her heart and nodded, her eyes welling with tears. As Mark walked away, Dr. Sterling, who had been watching from the nursing desk, walked over to Anna. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at the silver coin in her hand. You know, Anna, I've been practicing medicine for 15 years, and I think I learned more from you that night than I did in all of med school. What did you learn, doctor? Anna asked. That the most powerful tool in this hospital isn't the MRI machine or the latest pharmaceutical, Sterling replied. It's a nurse who refuses to look away when the world gets uncomfortable. If you believe speaking up can save someone, type, "I will live better." Anna Lopez continues to work in the ER near the naval base today. She is no longer a rookie by any definition, though she still carries that fresh, beginner's mind perspective into every room she enters. She still works the night shifts, the ones where the shadows are long, because she knows that's when the silent watchers are most likely to need a voice. She has become the unofficial guardian of the soldiers who come through those doors, the one who knows how to read the codes of the quiet. This story isn't just about a SEAL sniper or a high-stakes military accident. It's about the power of the quiet professionals who hold our world together. It's about the nurse who notices the trend on a monitor, the teacher who sees the sadness in a student's eyes, the mechanic who hears the faint, rhythmic rattle in an engine before it fails. It's about the people who pay attention to the details that everyone else is too busy to see. We live in a world that celebrates the loud. We celebrate the heroes who make the big speeches and the leaders who stand in the spotlight. But the true foundation of our safety is found in the people who pay attention to the silence. It's found in the people who are brave enough to trust their own eyes when the experts in the authorities tell them they are wrong. Mark Davis returned to his unit, but he never forgot the nurse who pulled him out of the psychological fire. He became an advocate for mental health within the SEAL teams, using his own story to prove that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's a different kind of tactical strength. He proved that even the strongest warriors need a watcher sometimes. And Anna? She keeps the silver coin in her locker, right next to her stethoscope. Every time she feels discouraged, every time a senior doctor dismisses her concern, every time she feels like just a nurse, she touches the cold, engraved metal. She remembers the hawk and the rifle. She remembers that she is a watcher too. In every hospital, in every office, in every street, there are people sitting in silence, fighting wars that no one else can see. They are waiting for someone to notice the shadow. They are waiting for someone to look past the "I'm fine" and see the truth. Be that person. Be the one who notices the trend. Be the one who speaks up when the room is silent. Because sometimes The difference between a tragedy and a miracle is just one person who refuses to look away. Sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is to simply notice that someone is struggling. Anna Lopez proved that expertise doesn't come with a title or a decade of experience. It comes with a heart that is willing to listen to the whispers of the code. She is a nurse. She is a watcher. She is the reason a hero got to find his way back home. And she is the proof that one quiet voice can change the world. If you believe quiet professionals deserve to be heard, leave a comment. Subscribe to The Veteran Story. These are the stories that shouldn't be forgotten.